Hello YouTube and welcome to part 2 of my guide on how to start a fish tank. Hopefully my first video was sort of helpful, but in this one I'm going to show you a little bit of my tank and explain what I had to do and the things I had to go through to make it all work. So enjoy.
Alright guys, so now I'm going to talk about the lighting I've got going on for this fish tank. The lighting is very important. Depending on what you want to do, like let's say you wanted to just have a bunch of fish and rocks but no corals, then you would need a very powerful light. But if you wanted a, let's say, like something like the Great Barrier Reef of Australia, you would need a really bam light. So basically what I've got going on right now is something that's called a T5 light fixture by Current USA. It's pretty good. You know, it does what I want it to do. I know that a T5 light is good, but it's not the best out there. What it does, it allows me to have all these soft corals. You know, it provides enough light for that stuff, these soft corals here who don't have hard skeletons. I'll talk more about that later. Basically, yeah, this light fixture is really cool. It runs all the way across the tank, so you know, maximum light. But another thing I want to talk about that's important is your sunlight in your room. So in this room, it's not in my basement, it's in the living room. So, you know, during the day when I open this up, there's a lot of sunlight, you know, that comes in this room. But if you'll notice, this sunlight does not reach my fish tank, and that's very important because if my fish tank were to be right here next to this window, it would be really cool, but what would happen is the sunlight would just overtake the tank. And what happens when there's too much sunlight in a fish tank, you're going to get a growth spurt of algae, and you might actually burn out the corals. I'm not sure about that, but you're just going to get a lot of algae growing on the glass, on the tank, everywhere, okay? And that's just going to be a big pain to try and remove and control. Now, there's nothing wrong with algae. Algae is actually very good for your tank in small quantities because it provides food for all your algae-eating animals, like snails and all that, and it's just good to have because it makes oxygen. It's like a little plant, you know? But if you have too much algae, it kind of defeats the purpose because you don't want to see algae everywhere, you know? It's kind of ugly. I'm not gonna lie, like this red stuff right here, that's not pretty, but it's okay. There's also, speaking of algae, in the back there, in case you were wondering, there's all this pink stuff growing. That's called a coralline algae. It's basically rock hard algae. It looks pretty, so I don't mind it. It's just an indication of how much calcium you've got going on in your tank. Light for the day. Turn it off real quick. Then there's a moonlight. This is more for like evening, you know, after dark kind of stuff. After the main light's off, you can turn it on. I kind of admire the, you know, it looks fluorescent, doesn't it? It's kind of cool and blue like that. And you can't really leave it on for long. And then there is a starlight. I don't know if you can see that little blue dot right there, but it pretty much runs all along. And what it is just at night when the house is dark, the reef is never completely dark. There's always going to be the moon shining in the sky, or like some sort of stars or something. Fish are never going to be completely in the dark. There's always going to be a little bit of light. Basically, that starlight does that job. It just puts enough light so it's dark, but you know, there's still enough light for them to see kind of what's going on. Now, you don't really need to have a starlight. That's not necessary, but it's just everything that you can duplicate to make it like the ocean and how it is best. But you don't need to get an actual starlight like this. Like, you could have a small little lamp right here next to the tank that's not bright and turn it on at night. That's fine. It's completely fine. But that's the lighting basically. So this T5 light fixture is very good starting point. I don't know if I'm ever going to get metal halides because they are pretty damn expensive. But if you've got the box for metal halide, I say go for it, because then you will not have any limits to what corals you want to get.
Okay, so let's look at this picture of the Great Barrier Reef. What I want to do with this is explain to you guys why the T5 lighting can only mostly support soft corals versus hard corals. You're looking at this picture right now. Basically, all the corals you're seeing, they're hard corals. They have hard skeletons, and they're all located on top of the reef, right? It's kind of like a jungle in the sense where the trees are competing for the most sunlight, right? So most of the soft corals actually tend to be lower in the reef than the hard corals. This is why they don't need as intense light than the hard corals. And if you want hard corals like that, like you're looking at, you need like top of the line lighting fixtures, because you basically need to put the sun above your fish tank, which is kind of expensive, but you can still do it. In my first video I was talking about the metal halides, and that's what they are. They're really bright lights. So yeah, just to clear that up a little bit.
Alrighty, so now I'm going to talk about the filtration of my fish tank, and possibly somewhat like your fish tank in the future. Basically, this protein skimmer right here I think does most of the work, because the way it filtrates stuff is actually very interesting. It's protein skimming is like used in swimming pools and stuff. What it does is it takes water in, and let's see if I can take you inside there. I can't really see that well, but it makes a bunch of bubbles basically, and it rises the bubbles through the top, through the tower, and then all the organic matter that's trapped in the bubbles gets carried over to this. You take this out, take it over to your sink, and clean it out. And this, I think, is the most effective, because it takes out a lot of waste, a lot of the organic waste that's not eaten by this stuff. And the water it takes out is pure, it's clean. It's not like you know, this is not going back in the tank. It completely removes it. Like for example, this power filter right here, it's a little different. What it does is it traps the detritus inside a sponge. So basically what happens is, yeah, this gets more stuff out than that, but the water still goes through that sponge, and then it gets released back into the tank. So what that means is that after a while, when detritus is built up on that sponge, it's going to get released. Some of it's going to get re-released back in the water, since it's not out of the way like this protein skimmer. That's why I like the protein skimmer a lot more. Of course, when I first started out, I only had the protein skimmer, and you know, it's not really easy to tell how much filtration you're going to need. I have a lot of fish, so it's kind of like there's more fish, there's more poop, so I need more tank janitors, right? More hermit crabs going around. Everything's pretty much like life support for either the corals and the fish. Everything else is just working to survive and just eat waste from the fish, or you know, give food to the coral, whatever. But going back to the filtration here, what I had, this protein skimmer by itself, is not enough for me. Maybe you're gonna have maybe just coral. Some people, they just have corals, they just have like one fish going around, they don't need that much filtration. However, I needed a lot of filtration, so then I had to step it up to a power filter there. Of course, some people have sumps where, you know, they're under the tank, it's out of the way, it's not behind your tank, there's none of those messy cables going down here. It's nice, it's definitely nice, but I looked into getting a sump for myself, and these cost around like $400 just for the sump. And you know what, I thought, I'm not going to be looking back here a lot, I'm going to be in front of the tank right here, not paying attention to maybe that pump in the back. But come on, I mean, I still enjoy this fairly easily. But yeah, basically what happened to me when I only had these two filters right here, I don't really know how, because it's plenty enough of filtration, but what I'm thinking is that the fish waste wasn't always getting caught in the filters and the pumps, right? It would settle down in the sand, it would settle in the rock somewhere, maybe in the back of the tank somewhere, I don't know. But what started happening was this thing called red algae was starting to grow, and it looks kind of like this, except it was all over the place. Now, red algae is something that you are going to run into. Everybody's had to do it. Everybody's had to fight against it. It's really ugly, and it's not even a form of algae. Actually, it's a form of bacteria. It just feeds on this thing called phosphates, and phosphates, they are kind of like what you get after something decomposed in the water. It could be like food that's uneaten in the sand. It just gets decomposed, and then what you get is phosphates. Every single organism has phosphates, blah blah blah. I'm not going to get into it, but basically I had too many phosphates in my tank, and my protein skimmer and my filter weren't really doing its job. So if you can picture this whole sand bed was covered by this red stuff. It was really ugly. The rocks were covered in red stuff too. No animals were dying, no corals were dying. It was just ugly. So I mean, it's just a bad sight. So what I got was this phosphate reactor, and what it does is basically these balls in there, all they do is trap the phosphates in the inside the balls there. So it's pretty nice. It's cleared up everything for me. I didn't really know about the phosphate reactors when I first started getting them, so I looked into ways of getting rid of that algae, and the first thing that came to mind that I saw was this algae killer thing, or I think I have it in here still somewhere. It's this thing right here, this algae fix marine aquarium algicide, whatever. It's it won't hurt any of the fish, any of your corals. What it does is just kills all the algae. And then, okay, so you have a bunch of dead algae, so you take it out of your tank, and then you're like, okay, yeah, this is nice. But then 2 days later, it all grows back because they get kind of like resistant to it, because it doesn't completely kill off everything. So what remains gets resistant to that stuff, and you have to put more and more. But the point is that you're not fixing the problem. You're just how can I put this? You're just kind of delaying it. Like, it's just kill the algae. 2 days later, it grows back, and it gets more and more resistant. So to fix that problem, I got a phosphate reactor. Now that's just what I needed. Maybe you won't need that because you won't have as many fish. Maybe you're going to need a bigger phosphate reactor because you'll have more fish. I don't know. Everybody has a different story about their fish tank, but it's going to be up to you to find out. But yeah, basically that's my filtration. Not including the biological filtration that's inside the tank, like all these rocks and stuff. Inside of there's like worms, tiny little things like crabs, shrimps. There's one right there. You can see this green crab in between the rocks there, just kind of chomping on some algae. But yeah, basically that filtration system works good for me. The power filter, the protein skimmer is very important. I think everybody should have a protein skimmer. And then if you're having some algae problems, definitely get a phosphate reactor. Now in my power filter also there are some like carbon stuff in there. It just helps the water keep it clear so it's not like cloudy or something. Pretty much every power filter comes with some sort of carbon implementation thing, so it's not too complicated. But yeah, that's my filtration.
Alrighty, thanks for watching the video, guys. There's more coming. I didn't have enough space to fit it all into one video, and next I'm going to talk about the actual ecosystem of a reef tank. So yeah, thanks for watching. Subscribe if you want to, or thumbs up the video, it helps, and thank you.